So some of you who have joined us for today, so for those, I would like to welcome on the panel Professor Vidhu Shekhar, who is our Associate Head of Center for Financial Innovation and Assistant Professor in Finance and Economics Department of SPJIMR. So I would request him to start the webinar. Over to you, Professor Shekhar.
Yeah, thank you, Pragya. Thanks a lot. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today, the second day of our How to Conduct Practitioner Research webinar. We have with us today Dr. Arunima Haldar, who is Assistant Professor in our area of Economics and Finance at SPJIMR. She is one of the workhorses for publication at our institute. So you can always rely on her to generate a good research paper for the institute and for her own research as well. She has well focused on practitioners area. In fact, I think corporate governance is somewhere where she herself is a board member of a couple of startups and working on the research for corporate governance. So it's kind of a good immersion into the area where you're working on, another way of approaching the practitioners research per se. And of course, we all know the importance of practitioner research that we discussed yesterday in our webinar too. The primarily being that how long can you do a business and social study research without actively being in touch with the people who actually practice it. If you do it too much, you perhaps might land up in a situation that economics is in today, right? They keep talking about assumptions and yet are not able to predict too much about it, right? So there is a lot of value in being close to the area where the work that you are studying is actually undertaken, and that's where the practitioner research comes from, right? So without delay, I'll hand it over to Professor Arunima, but I'll quickly have a quick introduction about her. So she's an avid researcher in the area of corporate governance and gender in management. She is an advisory board member in 2 startups on EdTech and reviving lost Indian art forms. And she is a PhD from IIT Bombay, gold medalist in MBA and graduate from Shriram College of Commerce. And she has been conferred the Global Innovation Award in the category of Writing with Integrity by Turnitin. And imagine that in the era of ChatGPT and plagiarism all over, She has up her sleeve several conferences, including Aston India Center for Applied Research Conference at Aston University. Very well published across peer-reviewed journals from Journal of Business Research, Business Strategy and Environment, Public Management Review, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, IMB Management Review, so on and so forth. All right. She's also in the editorial board of International Journal of Global Business and Competitiveness, and an editorial review board member of Journal of Business and Ethics, British Journal of Management, Journal of Small Business Management, Pacific Account Review, and Psychology of Women Quarterly. I think I have counted all possible research research journals in existence already, right? So great. Let me hand over the platform to Dr. Arunima. Dr. Arunima, all yours. You are on mute. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Vidhu, for your kind introduction. Okay, so I would like to welcome you all for the session. So first of all, before even starting the session, let us try and understand what is the expectation of the audience. If one or two could write that, what are the expectations which you have from this session? Or what are the problems that you are facing? Because as you are working towards the competition paper, right, what are the problem areas which you are facing so that we can handle that as well?
While they actually come up, maybe we can start with your
sure. Let me just start that. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what is a practitioner research and how is it different from a academic research per se? So when it comes to practice, the best thing is it should be having an impact for managers, for practicing managers. If you would look at the recent statistics which we have looked at globally, one of the major problems which India faces is we are increasing on the quantum of research, but the impact is reducing day by day. So it is very important for us as management researchers to do research which has impact, which can be utilized by the practice, and the recommendations would be practically applicable. So let's try and understand what is the whole gamut of practitioner research all about, and how is it different from academic research, or is it similar, or what are the steps which are taken which would enable us to recommend some practices or some loopholes which the existing practices have and which could be bridged as well by our simple takeaways for the practice. The first problem which every researcher, as well as you and me, faces: what should be a interesting research question? Is it really interesting to practice, or it is just the academic question? So when we are pounding on this research question thing, we may look at around us. For example, if we just look at this particular picture on Instagram, fine. So this is all about banking, and this is talking about what are the challenges. If you just look at the first one, fine. What are the technological challenges enhancing the mobile experience? If we are looking at what are the regulatory challenges, how should we integrate AI? How should we reduce the payment processing costs? There could be n number of challenges which banks are facing. So this is one of the thoughts which we looked at. One of the picture came to our mind. We went ahead and looked at Twitter. Twitter, we found that there was a tweet by one of the bankers, and where he's the head of operations and technology and human resources, and he's talking about the importance of implementing blockchain to enable some of the challenges. Remember the first slide we just looked at, there were some challenges with banking, and you were intrigued by that. And here a tweet comes up which is talking about blockchain as a technology, as an innovative technology, which can help maybe reduce some of the existing challenges which banks has. We went ahead and we looked at some more magazines. What are these magazines talking about? We looked at Bloomberg Markets. We looked at the Facebook post of SBI. So here also they were talking about we are going to into deployment phase of blockchain, and I believe the move will lower cost by about 40 to 50%, because the beauty of blockchain is that it takes care of so many things simultaneously. So when we looked around us, blockchain was a technology which everybody was talking about in the media, in the magazines, in social media channels, and they were talking about it in a manner that it could combat some of the existing challenges which banks face. We also looked at some of the white papers by technology companies. This white paper by Accenture told that blockchain can help banks save on costs, business operations, compliance, and centralized operations. And 90% of the bankers worldwide, and they are still in the exploring phase of usage of blockchain. So we found the aha moment, because all these channels where we looked at, be it Instagram, Twitter, white papers, magazines, all were talking about that still there are some technology which could be adopted by banks so that they can provide better user experience. They can provide much more efficiently. They can use the process. They can enhance the final experience of the customer being in a service industry. So we thought that let's formulate a problem, which is to understand the challenges which are likely to be faced by banking industry while adopting the blockchain technology. So while coming up with this research question, how did we rightly frame the question? If we go back and look back, we may talk to practice, we may talk to some of the bankers and ask them, but these are some of the things which we have read in the media, which are there on social media. Do you really feel that there is a need for such technology in banks? We try and understand from the listening to them that what is bothering them. Why, when we know that this technology has so many advantages, they are unable to adopt it in the daily usage. We could also talk about what are new disruptions which could help them bridge some of the challenges, bridge some of the problems that the existing banking system has in the country. And we could also look at that finally using this technology, is it really impacting their bottom line or top line? Is it really leading to some of the cost efficiencies by these bankers? So using these some of the key points, we came up with the problem. Let's try and understand, when blockchain technology has so many advantages, why still banking sector in India is unable to adopt it fully? Fine. So what are the challenges which are likely to be faced by Indian banking industry while adopting blockchain? So when we tried and understood this question, that this would be our research question, Do you have any question which wherein you have any doubts about formulating a research question? You can easily post on the chat and in the Q&A section, and we would likely take it up. Okay, let's go ahead. So when we looked at this problem, first of all, we tried and looked at blockchain. It's a new wave in the digital transformation era. And as all of us know, it is gaining popularity day by day. If you look at all social media channels, there are posts about Bitcoin, there are posts about cryptocurrency, there are posts about how blockchain can impact different industries. Fine. And they are generating new business models. You can look at how fintech is really revolutionizing the existing setup where the traditional banks could not. This topic has any business value? Yeah, we looked at that it can help in improving business process, it helps in social sharing, it manages the contract workflows, and again, the best part is it increases transparency process for efficiency of customer experience. And finally, it has business value by reducing or making the cost efficient. So we looked at the past literature. What is it talking about blockchain? Because now that we are doing in blockchain in banking industry, so earlier works were just done from engineering or technical perspective. And moreover, the blockchain in financial industry has been studied, but it's more of the global scenario. But in India, it is still at a nascent stage. If we know the RBI has set up a IDBRT, a whole body is there, where experts from different banks have come together to discuss the various challenges which are there in blockchain, in adopting blockchain. So now we know that blockchain is important. Second, we looked at the literature, which was just talking about, moreover, our research, the academic research per se, is talking about how it can be adopted in engineering solutions, banking, or financial sector. It has been studied, but more from a European, or we talked about other developed nations perspective. But when we come to emerging markets such as India, we have very less papers talking about it. So let's go deeper into it. But what are the challenges? We are still unclear about it. Because my topic is to understand the challenges, so my design would also be accordingly formulated. The topic has a clear cut, I would say, direction on the kind of design which you would formulate for forming your research. I know as this is so common on our desk, and as we go deeper into this, we would have so many white papers, we would have different pages which you would with different graphs, figures, so many files would be in front of us at what to study and how to even start with this research. As now I have my topic, but I'm still confused. But how would I go about doing this research? So let's give me you a framework. But this is not a definite framework, but this may work for most of you. But if you want, you can tilt it to the way you want. So I'm talking about how you can use a mixed method palette. If you know a palette is full of colors. You can have red, blue, green, and white. And similarly, how I can use different colors, different variety of techniques together in a palette and make my painting a beautiful one. So in this way, so research design is just like a black box. We do not know how to start with that. Should we use the quantitative techniques? Should I use primary data? Should I use secondary data? Should I use mixed method? Or I may say qualitative. So one of the ways in which you could do interesting research would be using mixed method in this blockchain, because I wanted to understand these challenges. I would not get many solutions from the secondary data, be it in magazines, because they would be focused article on a particular topic. So let's start with a qualitative, in-depth, unstructured interviews. So what are these unstructured interviews and why are they in-depth? First of all, coming to interviews are just like conversations which we have with each other. But in this case, you would have with people having domain knowledge about blockchain technology, and they have also worked in that, and typically banking, because these people would be able to add insights for your understanding of the problem. Remember, your problem was to understand the challenges. So now you want to talk to people in banking industry who are related to technology, who can give you that what is the real life problems they face on day-to-day working atmosphere in the banks. So unstructured, because if you would structure, for example, what is your name? What is the new technology you have used? What is the new technology you would use in future? Thank you for your interview. it gives a very, I would say, a structured viewpoint, and sometimes you may miss on the nuances which that person might want to add on. So if we leave it open-ended and leave it, I would say, just rather talk for just 5% of the time and give the participant, give the basically the expert with whom we are interviewing, give that person space of 95% time, and we just listen to her, him or her. Fine. So in this case, if we talk, if we just leave them with some open-ended questions, for example, what are your views on using blockchain technology and banking, and let that person speak. And when, as and when the responses come, you may formulate the next question. So that is the way unstructured interviews work. You may have 3 or 4 broad themes in your mind, but you may formulate the questions as and when the speaker talks about the topic, and accordingly you can mold it up. So first, we could start with some interviews. Then from these interviews, you'll be transcribing them. Transcribing is nothing but verbatim writing what exactly the participant told you about the questions which you had asked. And from that, reading that transcription again and again, you may come up with some things which are again and again coming. And finally, you may shortlist some of the themes. These themes, which may be cost efficiency, which may be technological innovation, which may be R&D adoption. Fine, these may be some of the themes. So how would these themes translate into some of the quantitative things if I want? For example, if you are talking about R&D, fine. So one of the things which would matter for adoption would be the R&D which the bank spend. So one of the proxies for this R&D could be, you would look at the R&D intensity. So this way I can have a text which is converted into number, which is R&D intensity is nothing but research and development expenses as a percentage to sales. So if you get this number, similarly, you can have those themes and you can look at which is the most dominant themes, and adoption of blockchain could be your dependent variable, and you can easily run a regression in the quantitative phase. In the third phase, you have already come up with these themes, for example, cost efficiency R&D, and you would again validate that with the experts. So this would be second round of interviews, but here you would get those experts, be it from academia, be it from industry. So these experts, you would have to define who is an expert for your study. And you may just validate that these are the themes which we have got from our study. Do you agree? So this would help in validation of your study. So we would delve deeper into how the study is conducted. So first of all, look at the setting in which we are doing the research. Because we wanted to understand the blockchain challenges, we conducted a study in the financial capital of India. And it made sense because most of the, if you say, registered office of major banks and financial institutions is in Mumbai. It's among the world's top 10 centers of commerce in terms of global financial flow. And as you all know, we have the highest number of billionaires amongst all the cities in the world, and the fourth most populous city in the world, which you are already, we are reaping the demographic dividend. So this is the research setting which you would write in the qualitative work. First, what is very important to understand, which is the setting in which you are conducting research. Let's go deeper into that. So next is, as we told, that we will be taking in-depth interviews. So what is more important in interviews? Natural setting. Really important that you conduct that interviews preferably in the natural setting of the participant, because it's not just what he speaks, his surrounding and his comfort in the surrounding is equally important when he is getting interviewed. Because if you are unable to make that person comfortable, it is sometimes you may not get the right picture, and you may get some answers which you may be politically correct, or which may be the talk of the town, fine. But if you really want to dig deeper and want to understand that person's maybe organizational views as well as personal views over the years, the a technocrat may have worked with several organizations. So they may be beyond that particular bank in which that person is working, fine. So you can clearly specify that your responses can be dependent on this bank or your professional experience in technology and banking. So explicitly, you can tell that to the participant. Make that participant comfortable. It's most important than getting the answers for questions. Once you have build that familiarity with that person, you can easily get all your answers. So that opening phase is equally important. So preferably have these interviews at a natural setting in which your participant is comfortable. Second, conversational style. It should not look like that I'm just asking questions. Recently, in one of the interviews which one of my intern was taking, and as I listened to the recording, it was okay. Question number one is, what is your name? Question number two is, what is blockchain technology? And I was surprised. If this is the way you are taking an interview, no interviewee would be happy to give that interview. It would be a mechanical exercise to make it a pleasing experience. Let the person enjoy the experience of sharing his knowledge with you. Everybody wants to speak and they just want good listeners. So, as an interviewee, be a good listener. You should just speak 95% of the time. And sorry, it should be you should just speak 5% of the time and give the chance to the participant to speak 95% of the time. You have to be a good listener and avoid reading the questions. You may be grammatically incorrect. It's perfectly fine. Be it a smooth flowing conversation. And these are the best interviews you could get in a qualitative setting. Another thing, offline versus online. Every time it would not be possible for you or the interviewee to meet offline. Sometimes you may also have some online interviews. The protocol remains same. I would again repeat, the protocol remains same. Opening phase, building that trust, building that friendship with that expert is equally important. You have to respect that person's time, but building that trust is equally important. At opening phase, telling why you are doing the study, telling about that the confidentiality of the responses would be kept. In case you want to record that interview, you should be giving that in writing and telling that this would be just, for example, in this competition, this responses would only be used for writing the academic paper for the competition at SPJIMR. Because unless you give that, no person would be able to maybe open up easily. Because once they build that trust, then these things would go away. So initially, building that kind of friendship, kind of openness is very important. Sometimes you would go ahead and meet them in lunch also, meet them during their travel also, just to help them out. Fine. For example, I was talking to one of the topmost luxury companies and to one of their customers whom they really wanted to make their customer. They literally took a flight with and took that business class seat, which is next to the person, just to talk to that person. So look at the kind of intensity, because as a researcher, you should have that intensity that you want to really talk to that person and make that person comfortable so that you can understand and learn the nuances. Fine. And so that all the knowledge which that person has is he's comfortable, he or she is comfortable to share with you. Fine. And this is the best moment which you would have experiencing that interview and listening to that interview. Please understand that you should make those notes carefully. Fine. Apart from just writing what the person is saying, body language is equally important. Pauses and each and every action which the person does before or after any question also has a influence on the result. So be cautious about those things also. Recordings some might sometimes not capture those things. So you as a researcher must make a note of these things. If not at that point in time, after the interview is over, please make your notes immediately because these are some small nuances which you may forget. Let's come deeper in this research. So the opening phases, first of all, we told or rather we would discuss with that participant that this is the aim of our research and why are we conducting this research. In your case, you would clearly tell that you are a participant and you want that you are a participant and you who wants to conduct a research in this particular domain for a competition. And that is why you want their insights. Fine. So opening phase is just to warm up the discussion. For example, here there's just one question. How is blockchain perceived by you and your organization? This may not be your main question. So once that I would say that initial dilemma initial agitation is over, then you can come to the main probing phase. And you can rightly ask the question related to challenges. In this case, also, you would just see that we just had 4 questions in this research. Fine. And we may not have read it fully. Fine. We may just have some phrases to so that we can give them hints to talk about. And later, you have to close that conversation by thank you for the participation. And if the participant has any questions for you, and another thing which you should always do is to send a thank you note to the participant, because he or she has shared their precious time to make you understand the problem. And another thing, as a student, you must ask for some references if they could suggest, wherein you can get one more reference or one more expert for answering your questions. Okay, so in case if you have any questions, please write in the chat or Q&A box. I would be happy to answer. So in the interview stage, when we talk about, remember, we are still in the first stage. If we go back to this diagram, we are still in in-depth unstructured interviews. We have just discussed how would you conduct a protocol. This is called an interview protocol, which you would have. Fine. So in this phase, you would think that my data is the interviews which I'm getting. Fine. So interviews is the method by which you're collecting data. Fine. So when you're writing this data section, you should talk about the sample. So when you took these interviews in this case in our research was 20 senior and middle management executives who had experience in banking and had worked in the technology sector, also in the banking space. The average age of all the participants was 45 years, and they had first-hand experience for building blockchain solution in BFSI domain. So these were some of the prerequisites which the author, in this case, we had kept before they can get into the interviews. And these may be, the participant could be from private PSU or for an Indian bank. How did we contact them? Professional contacts in banking. In this case, we had some professional contacts in the banking, and secondly, we had asked from referral from existing respondents. In your case, it is a wise decision to connect with some of the connections on LinkedIn, or you can join some specific groups which are for that particular thing, and you can write there. You can have some specific posts to some of the people whom you feel would be knowledgeable about the topic, or you can also have a generic post, and people who would be willing to participate in this interview would contact me or message me directly. Right? It's not a wise idea to write and interact with people publicly. It's a wise idea to have specific people and message them privately to connect with them. And the method may be semi-structured in-depth interview. I discuss why it is semi-structured or unstructured. It gives you more leeway to change the flow of your questions. In-depth interviews, because you want to get the deeper insights into the challenges. Because finally, when you would come up with the answers, you should have an understanding of that particular concept which you are coming up. So when we talk about the timelines, in this case, it is just interviews. Why do these things matter? It equally matters to show the rigor of your research. For example, before even going for interviews, you had designed your questionnaire and then you got it validated by experts. Before even going to the interviews, you got it validated by experts, because if there are some questions which may be offensive, which may not be correctly drafted, which may not help the participant to give the right essence, you may change it at this point in time. So after this, we had done the appointment scheduling, we contacted them professionally, and then we called them up, and then we had emailed them, and then we had sent them follow-up emails and then phone calls, because it is difficult to get appointments from corporates who are really busy in their work. Right? So sometimes you need to follow up with them and make them understand that how this research is useful. And finally, the final interviews wherein we had done personal visit during this time frame. And then we would later talk about the validation, which was done by academic and industry experts from this timelines. So this timeline helps a lot to the reader that this is the kind of rigor and time you have spent in the field for collecting your data, for coming up with the final conclusions which you have got. In my case, the participant detail profile. Okay, there's a question. Let me just check that. Okay, Siddharth, could you tell me what is your domain? So for everyone, I would just read it. Where do we find the experts to get the questionnaire validated in our domain? Siddharth, if you could tell me the domain, I would be able to answer this better. Okay, strategic decision maker. So every company have these chief strategy officers. So these are the right people whom you should contact. And the best way is to have to get connected with them. First generation entrepreneurs. So that it's so easy to get first generation entrepreneurs. You would get n number of them. So if you go to any of these startup fest, so most of the time you would not have different people doing different things, because in a startup it may be a one man show. If they are first generation entrepreneurs, it may be just team of 3 or 4. So the main uh, CSO, CTO, CEO might be the same person doing the strategic decisions. Fine. So in that case, it is not at all difficult. I think even if you post a LinkedIn post, you will be easily, happily getting those entrepreneurs. Fine. And if you do not get them, please write to me. I can connect you to many of them. Fine. I hope that answers your question. You can go to many of these startup fairs. You can go to many of these startup funding fairs. You would be easily getting those entrepreneurs. And many of these incubation cells, these would also be places where you can get lots of references for entrepreneurs. That would be helpful. And of course, the LinkedIn post and the connecting with them on different social media platforms is also a helpful way. Okay. Any other question? Okay, for example, in this blockchain research which we have done, so we had, I would suggest, for example, I had some connections in some banks, so I just started with them, and then it was more of snowballing. I would say I took references from the existing people who gave me interviews, and they referred to me to 1 or 2 more people. Fine. So that is how you complete the loop. So I completed 25 interviews. One of them was CEO of a company, one was CIO, two was CIO, two was CFO, 8 senior VP, 7 middle manager. Another thing which I have seen with many of my students, which the concern comes, ma'am, I'm just a student. Why would a CEO talk to me? As a researcher, understand and make them understand. You are a researcher who is deeply interested in understanding their problem and wants to formulate a solution for them. Meet any person on earth. Fine, you can connect to anyone on earth. Just make them understand how this research is useful for practice, how it would be impacting the whole banking industry. Once they understand that merit, I do not think anybody would be denying you any interview. And the best thing is being student, you are harmless to them. You are not a reporter who would be verbatim quoting them in a paper. You are just using their insights for developing a model. In this case, it's not a, I would say, not a scientific model. In this case, it's not a scientific drug discovery. In this case, it may be an econometric model. This may be some of the solutions which you would provide, or recommendations which you may provide to policymakers, to bankers, right? And maybe sometime to a common man also. So if they just see that you have that spark and you have that, I would say, you have that feel for that research, and really passionate about that research, believe me, nobody would deny you that. And once they are convinced, they would be happy to answer n number of questions. So, few of my experience, my interview started with just 10 minutes and it ended with almost 2 or 3 hours discussion. So, what people are looking at, if you're just wasting their time, or are you really caring for their words? So, one of the best key is be a good listener. You would get all the answers. You may not even ask those questions. Okay, moving ahead. So what are the data sources? As of now, we have discussed, we have interviews. Fine. So you would just feel that these interviews are your data sources. So we had 20 sessions formally recorded and transcribed. Believe I have recorded these sessions, these interviews when I took these interviews. But this recording was done after taking permission from the interviewee. Fine. And they got transcribed. Transcribed means verbatim writing what the speaker told. And was this the only data source? But when I was doing my research, I also looked at 30 single space type field notes. I had prepared these notes. For example, when I was taking these interviews, there are many nuances which were happening parallelly. So we were making these 30 single space field notes alongside, which would help us to also have the context in which those answers were given. 10 documents, industry reports, white papers. Remember in the beginning, we had read some Accenture industry reports. You may have other technology players or other bankers, industry reports on the same topic. You may have reports from NITI Aayog, IDRBT. This is a committee by RBI which is set up on blockchain. And many of these presentations for be it bankers, be it technology companies. So these all are data sources. Many times we use lots of data sources, but we just stick to interviews and we write just interviews. Please write all the data sources which you have used. It adds value to your research. That you have not just looked at interviews, you have used other secondary sources as well for collecting your data. Yeah, Raghunath, I would be more than happy. You can take the screenshot of my presentation. And if you want, just write to me. I would be happy to share that also. Okay, so finally, after doing this interviews, we had transcribed the data and then we came up with themes. So how do we come up with themes? These are the final themes, and you look at these answers, these look so nice. You would just have paragraphs and paragraphs. For example, you would have 350 pages of text. The best way is to read it again and again, to read it again and again. What are the key areas which are coming? For example, a person may be telling that our bank wants to adopt blockchain, but we are facing a major cash crunch because if we are trying to adopt blockchain, it's a major operational cost which is involved and which we may not be able to justify at this point in time. Fine. So you may have different banks giving different rationale. As of now, we do not have any operations wherein we can use blockchain. One of the bankers may say that. Some of the bankers may say that our size is so small that we may not be able to utilize these innovative technologies as well. Another banker may say our R&D intensity or our bank is not ready for any this kind of technological innovation as of now. So you may have lots of answers. Read them. What are the major themes which are coming up? And then you can try and club similar ones and come up with these final themes. For example, what we found after taking these interviews, 20 interviews, we found it is technological context, organizational context, operational, regulatory, and environmental and societal context. These are the key challenges which banks face so that they are unable to adopt this technology in the banks, typically in India. Remember, we are conducting this study in India. So the next stage, remember initially we started with qualitative interviews. Then we did analysis of these thematic analysis. Now at this stage, you can stop. You can also convert them into proxies and do a regression. If you do not want to do, you can stop and go to the third stage, which was again a third validation, again a qualitative study wherein you are looking at experts who are experts in this area of blockchain. Let's assume a CTO of a bank who has already adopted blockchain. Fine, which may be in India, which may be abroad, because that person is the expert. You want to get a validation that these are the 5 themes which I have got based on my interviews, based on my understanding of my primary and secondary data sources. Do you agree? So in this paper, what we did, we validated that the 8 domain experts comprising of academic experts as well as senior technocrats. So these were some of the experts, and I had this table in my paper. Now, these are the experts who are having experience of from 13 to 50. And in this case, we had people who had investment banking, research, and academic experience with special interest in fintech, 2 people in 4 decades of corporate experience in implementing IT technologies across industries. Fine. So we had different experts, and we also had a member of a blockchain working committee, which was formed by IDRBT. We showed them that these are the 5 challenges which we found based on our research. Do you agree? So one of the so based on this, we got if you just look, we asked these experts to rate the extent to which they considered these 5 challenges, explain the adoption issue. So we got a satisfactory rating. We got a rating which was satisfactory out of 7. So hence we assume that the key challenges which we have found are correctly explaining the balance challenges for adoption of this technology. These challenges may be different if some of my participants might have different insights. Fine. So this is one of the limitation of any study. So what are the practitioner implications? Because now you have conducted your study, you have validated your study, but finally, who who is the takeaway? For whom did you conduct a study? What are the recommendations which you are giving to the bankers? So first of all, you are making these technology professionals in the banks that what are the inhibitions or what are the inhibitions of customer when they are adopting this technology, and what are the key mechanism and strategy that they should adopt. And on one side, they should be able to balance. It's not just the organizational challenges, it is a technological challenge, it's an environmental challenge. So on another side, they have to balance these trade-offs and then adopt this technology. So we have some of the future directions. For example, we can talk to policymakers that when you're making policy for these banks to benefit from blockchain, these things should be parallelly looked upon so that smooth transition can be taken place in the technology team of these banks. So let's talk about the key takeaways of this research discussion. First of all, you have to choose a practitioner problem. Remember the practitioner problem? It came from practice. We looked at it in Twitter. We looked at in some of the magazines, white papers. We talked to some of the people to understand what is something which is bothering them. What is something which they want to change, but they are unable to change. Fine. So we went deeper into that and we had a problem, which was a problem which is really impacting, which is really creating problem to the practice, be it in the banking industry, you may look at insurance, you may look at microfinance, you may look at any sector for that matter, be it cement company, be it any company. So first is choosing a practitioner problem, which would really impact practice. Listen to them. We went and took interviews and we wanted their insights that why is this problem bothering them? Then we went to more participants, listen to them in the other banks, listen to them from various facets of life, just to understand that what are the challenges. Then they know that blockchain is really important and is helping banks in cost efficiency, helping bank in efficiency of processes, many more things. But why they are unable to adopt? We listened to them. We added on insights from not just primary data. If you remember, we also looked at white papers. We also look at some of the banking presentation. We also look at the IDBRT report. So we also added the primary data with different sources of information which was present online. And then we came up with the themes by analyzing the data. Remember, we transcribed these interviews, look at what are the commonalities which are coming, and that's how we would finalize the theme. So this is called thematic analysis. And then we had these themes. Then we did another level of robustness check, which was another level of qualitative interviews, interviews from the experts. We told them that these are the 5 themes which we have got based on our studies analysis. Do you agree? So they had to give a rating from 7. So all of them gave a satisfactory rating. So that helped us validating. Yes, our results made sense to the experts. Because here, if you have some queries, you may again go back to the drawing board and conduct some more interviews to get to the point. And finally, based on your research, you would have 4 or 5 practitioner recommendations. And what do you recommend to practice? And what are the key steps they should take for adopting this blockchain technology? If you want to read more on this paper with all the diagrams, all the information, it's a published paper of mine in qualitative research in financial market. It's the Emerald Journal, and it has been published in 23. Fine. I would be happy to share that paper with anybody who is interested, and it's uploaded publicly on Emerald site. So thanks a lot. So I would like to take any questions right now.
Thank you, Professor. That was very insightful and very in-depth information about how to conduct practitioner research. So those who have any questions, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A section and she will answer whatever questions you have.
Okay, I could see one of the questions by Siddharth Jain. So one of the things was, do the validation experts and the interviews would be different? Definitely, they have to be different, Siddharth, because if you are asking the same questions with same people, you would not get different results. The experts which you would choose must have much more experience in that particular domain. Yeah, Darshan, I can share this PPT and the research paper drive link on the mail. Definitely, this can be done by the team once we have completed it.
So, Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
So,
Can I close the presentation?
yeah, go.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, yeah, when we are trying to publish a research paper,
Yes.
the journals usually have the tendency to, go for more econometric and quant-based research. So, are there specific journals that, help our book, are interested in publishing this practitioner research? Do you think there are such journals?
Yes, there are such journals. For example, this blockchain paper, which I just discussed, was published in a qualitative research in financial market, which is an equally reputed journal in the finance space. And believe me, I did not had any econometric model in this paper. It was based on interviews of experts, and we had pseudonyms because we had the confidentiality agreement which we had signed with these participants. So we could easily publish a paper. Apart from that, there are many journals like Business Horizon. There are many practitioner-based journals, not just in finance and other domains as well. For example, in many are in fintech. So there are enough journals which would be happy today, or even which I would like to share that the SPJIMR is also coming up with a practitioner journal. We would be happy to take insights from these which are coming for the practice, from the practice to for the practitioner. And ultimately, we also write in academic research the practical implications for managers, the policy implications. It's just that instead of implication, we just convert them into recommendations. The rigor remains same. For example, in this research, we had taken interviews. You could do a focus group discussion. You can always do a survey. So depending on the research question, your methods would flow.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Okay. So is there any role of literature review in practitioner research? Amrita, I would suggest it's always a good idea to do literature review in practitioner research also. One of the things which helps you, you also understand what is the literature telling about that particular domain. So that gives you a background about that domain. Secondly, you can also look at what are the methods which they have utilized. Sometimes I have benefited from the literature about the method, about the model, about the kind of interviews they had used. Fine. So you have many data sources, for example. Fine. I may not feel Instagram may be a good source. Fine. But one of the papers may have used Instagram data. So literature review always gives you a pedestal so that you understand the existing research and build on it. Yeah, my question is not coming from the gap which is found in literature review. Question is coming from practice, but you can again look at the literature, which would help you build that up well. Okay, another question which we have is, as we have a basic framework in abstract that has already been selected. So when we are going forward in this research, can we focus on few criteria more and they can be transformed while we are doing this research? Definitely you can. See, when we wrote the abstract, that time we had a sketchy idea and you may have written about one or two things, but it's always a good idea to add on and to improve on that particular submission. And if you want, you can always have our inputs. If you want any specific inputs, write to us. You can also write directly to me if you want any specific inputs, and we can definitely do that. So you can transform, and always it should be for the betterment of the research. Any other questions?
In the chat, there is one question.
Okay.
Can we include ANOVA and research quantitative part in our research?
Definitely, you can include everything which you know, financially, which could help you answer the research question. Remember, it's not a question about having a econometric model, having an ANOVA, having a correlation or regression, or a FGD for that matter, which is nothing but focus group discussion. Fine. What matters is it helping you answer that question? If the answer is yes, please go ahead and do that. There are no best ways. No qualitative technique is best. No quantitative technique is best. Fine. So finally, you should be able to derive recommendation, derive solutions to the practitioner problem. So the way you derive would definitely be based on the research question.
I think somebody is asking, can practitioner research be published in academics journal? So similar
Yes.
what I asked.
I would suggest you to read my paper on blockchain and then discuss with me. It's definitely a practitioner paper, and wherein I have used no econometric model. It was just based on what I discussed right now.
Is
So
there a yeah,
now
sorry.
let me ask a quick question,
Sure,
Arunima.
sure.
So what's
Yeah.
a typical timeline from, let's say, the first ideation to submission, and then from submission to publication in such kind of a research? Typical
So,
and average, and maybe the fastest, both if you can mention.
so when you're talking about publication, you're talking about publication in academic journals.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So typically, fastest could be 3 months, and far could be 3 years.
No. I'm saying about practitioner research from conceptualization to the framework, interviews, for layout, mixed method, the whole process.
I think it can be easily done within a month or two, depending on how passionate you are about your research. I would not say time is a big factor here. It's all about your passion. See, time would come automatically if you have that passion, and if you really want to
Time
come to the solution.
interviews would actually exhaust
Yeah.
getting the
See,
appointment
see,
and getting
it's
the.
just that initially getting those appointments might be difficult, but if you get those 2 or 3 ones right, you would easily get the referrals for the next interviews. That's how we begin. So there's referral, basically it's a snowballing effect, because if you have convinced a person, he would also help convince 2 more person, and that's how you would get that set of interviews. It's not important to have those 25 interviews. Fine.
Hmm.
It's important to have, even you can have 10 interviews, but it should be relevant. Fine. It should come up with something which is really helping you formulate the solutions. That's more important. So the number is if we say the academic words, we talk about theoretical saturation. But when it comes to practice, you just think of your solution. Are you able to formulate your solution? Are your main things which you would recommend is clear to you? Once you feel that is enough, that it's enough. So there is no right number to it. But yeah, we would have to
Right.
have that minimum interviews. And you can always have those interviews. You can always have some of the YouTube videos. For example, the same topic. I could do a content analysis on YouTube videos. I can do on some of the Facebook live sessions. And it's not important that every time you have to meet that person. You can read so many white papers. So when you looked at my data sources slide, I just didn't have my interviews. I could have many more sources, many industry white papers, many presentations which are there on the web. Fine. So you can substantiate your interviews with many more data sources, which we normally do, but we don't write it. So I think writing is equally important.
So, Professor Arunima, I have a question. In reference to the same only as you spoke, there are peer-reviewed journals who would require, and even otherwise as a research paper from an academician's point of view, they would require you to kind of meet that level, that threshold limit, and a particular number which has come out as per the research methodologies that have been evolved so much. So they would say that if you're conducting an interview, this much number of interviews are necessary. So in such cases, what would you recommend? And on the other hand, from an industry perspective, if we see and if we're writing a practitioners oriented paper, we would know that now we've reached a level that we're getting similar responses from our interviewers and we can actually close it right then and there. So in such a case, for an academician, what is right? Like where should we stop, or should we follow the research methodology and go according to the number of interviews and then take a call?
Okay, thank you, Mansi. That's a very nice question. I think you have already answered your question. So when as a practitioner, you are just listening, as a researcher, you're just listening to the practitioner for a practice-based research. When you have felt that now the responses have started repeating or you're not getting any new thing. So that is also called in academic papers theoretical saturation. So if you can convince the editor or the reviewer that theoretical saturation has come up, so no number can defend that, 100 or a 10. Fine. So if you can tell, for example, in my case, I research on corporate governance of women on boardrooms. It is difficult to get a sample of 300. In many of my papers, even a sample of 10 is justified. For example, in this paper, even if I would have done with 10, because it is difficult to get implementers of blockchain in banking industry. Fine. So what is more important is your domain, Second, the theoretical saturation. If you could convince by your writing that theoretical saturation had been achieved. So that's a technical name in academia, and this is what you are doing in practice. I do not think they vary. It's just that the writing styles are a bit different. Somewhere you would have to match the writing style, match the expectations of the, I would say, the end customer. In this case, the end customer may be a practitioner, end customer may be an academician. So if you understand the expectations, you'll be able to meet it better.
Okay, we'll just take one more question. We are almost out of time. So, is there a framework to go from transcription to themes to findings? Like,
Yes, Siddharth, there is a framework. Basically, you would transcribe it fully. Then we have a full, you have enough literature on doing how to do a thematic analysis. But right now in this competition, we are not wanting you to go deeper into a thematic analysis. You can do it in 2 or 3 steps, right? Coming up with broad categories and then clubbing up through the themes. So here, when you're writing a practitioner paper for our competition, we do not, and we are not expecting you to go deeper into the exact protocol for doing a thematic analysis. So it is more of reading those answers again and again and coming up with some categories and then clubbing them and coming up with the main themes. So if you want a protocol, I would be happy to share the paper. You can just drop me an email for doing a content analysis. Okay, I have got a question. We are trying to do a sample questionnaire survey for few of our topics. What are the few things we need to focus on getting it right? Okay, so whenever you are having a questionnaire survey, first of all, you would ask questions about the demographics. Be careful. For example, if not required, you may not ask for the personal details, be it name or email ID if you do not need that. Find people are a bit skeptical to answer when it comes to their personal questions. So first, after having the demographics, you may have a combination of closed and open-ended questions. Find wherein they get some variety of and some space for writing answers. Another drawback of questionnaire surveys, people just leave it to yes or no. You may also have the option of any other, or the third blank is equally important because the person may do not want to write yes or no, and they may have different viewpoints about the same thing. So give that option. Also keep that survey short because people get bogged down if it is 5 or 6 pages. Keep it short and sweet. Fine. And then if you want, you may write and end with an open question. If you want for further insights, we can connect on this email ID. Fine. So keep it short so that they also feel nice about it and they want to fill it. Have that incentive right. Incentive is not just monetary incentive. Incentive is about that how are they contributing to the body of literature? How are they contributing to the banking industry by their thoughts? So if you make that message right, the opening message which you would send to the participant, many of them would be likely to get interested in filling it up. And many times surveys are filled up by, it's more of convenience sampling. Do not get into that because you would not get the right answers. Get to the right audience if you want to get to the right answers. It may take time, may take some reminders, but you would get the right answers. That would be my answer.
okay, thank you so much, Professor Haldar. That was very, very helpful. I think we would we'll have to wrap the session up. We are almost out of time. Thank you, Professor Shekhar, for being here and supporting us. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
So thanks a lot, CFI team, for inviting me. I really enjoyed this session.
Thank you.